The Human from the Dungeon, Chapter 108. Nick Smith, Adventurer Level 11. Human American. We walked for a while longer without incident. It felt like more than half an hour. The tree canopy didn't let much light through, so it was difficult to tell how long our journey was. Not that I was all that great at telling time with the sun. Once my feet started to get sore, we came across a portion of the path which made a sharp turn. Upon making the turn, we were faced with a fence that stretched far wider than it should have. I paused, took 2 steps back, and examined the way we came. The path, which had been lit well enough for us to see, was now shrouded in darkness. The direction that it came from, though, would definitely have taken us directly into the fence. My double-take caught Larry's attention, and he laughed.
"A spatial distortion," the Lich said, still chuckling. "One of many tricks employed by the fair folk to protect themselves, and the main reason it was so important for us to follow the path."
"I see," was my reply. We continued towards the fence, and as we got closer to it, I noticed that it was far more intricately detailed than I had initially realized. The bronze coloration of the metal paired well with the semi-chaotic designs that had been incorporated. Acorns, leaves, pine cones, and a variety of flowers were sporadically placed throughout the giant metal mural that was acting as a fence. Between these representations of plant life were complicated symbols that made my head hurt when I looked at them for too long. There were no guards at the gate, and when we approached it, it opened for us. Nash and I paused for a moment, but Jukka and Larry crossed the threshold of the gate without any hesitation. My brother and I shared a glance, then quickly followed. As we stepped through the gate, the scenery underwent a drastic change. Instead of hostile feral plants everywhere, we were standing in a very well-tended garden. The grass wasn't trimmed, but it was still uniform in length. The trees gently rose above the grass and beautifully manicured bushes, stretching their branches into the sky. There was an odd, non-symmetrical order to everything. Needless to say, it was much more relaxing than the area that we had come from. Ahead of us was a circular clearing paved with white stones, and beyond that was another gate. When I tried to look at what the gate was attached to, my eyes watered and my head hurt. A tall Fae waited patiently in front of the second gate, and nodded as we approached. "Jukka and Nash Alter, Nick Smith and Larry Vasselmayro," it said. "You are expected. Sit." I wanted to ask how long we would have to wait, but the giant Fae that stood before us had told us to sit. It was not a suggestion, nor a request. It was a command, and my bones itched to obey. Without a word, the 4 of us sat on one of the benches. It was then that I noticed the other people waiting to be seen. There were wilder, orcs, elves, dwarves, gnomes, and even some from races yet identified. I closed my eyes and pinched the bridge of my nose, fighting against the confusion that was assaulting my mind. How had I not seen these people?
"I don't like this place," Nash grumbled. "It's trying to play tricks on us."
"Yes, I had noticed that as well. Are all of these spatial distortions?" Jukka turned to Larry.
"I'm not entirely certain what it is you're referring to," Larry admitted. "The only oddity I've seen thus far was the fence appearing in an impossible location."
"That's 'cause he's dead," a familiar voice next to me pointed. "The living are way easier to fool with shrouds and perception alterations. It takes a lot more effort to get a non-living to stop seeing the world in a mundane way." I let go of my nose to look at the source of the voice. It was a very rotund fairy. It took a second to recognize them through the cloud that had begun enveloping my brain.
"Kint," I asked, "what are you doing here?"
"Same as you," the fairy grinned, "waiting. Are you feeling all right? I'm pretty sure that you weren't this pale yesterday."
I don't know."
Larry, Nash, and Jukka turned their attention to me, and I suddenly felt like I was being studied. Nash put his hand on my shoulder and stared into my eyes, which caused me to try and look at the ground for some reason. He grabbed my chin and tried to make me look at him.
"Nick, what's going on?" my brother asked.
"I
feel weird," I said. "Like I'm having trouble staying awake, but I'm not tired at all."
"That is the least of your worries," Ten said. "I'm barely keeping you conscious." "Did you look at the fence a little too closely?" Kit asked.
"It was very pretty."
"Ah, yep. That would be a shroud, you know. Most people would look away once it started to hurt. Any of you got any sugar?" I was dimly aware of my companions giving negative replies. Kent repeated the question to someone else, but I couldn't quite tell who. The seat beneath me began to feel as if it were rocking, but Nash held me steady.
"I got some." A red person walked over to us. "What's it for?"
"This guy looked at the fence a little too long. Got shrouded," Kent replied. "Spare some sugar for a favor."
No. I ain't got any use for fairy favors," the red guy laughed. "I can just give it to him direct. Should I sprinkle some in his mouth? What the feck is that thing?"
The red guy took a step back and studied me for a moment. I wanted to tell him that I was human. I wanted to ask what he was. Unfortunately, my mouth wouldn't do what I wanted it to because it was too busy feeding my tongue. Kent explained that I was a human and that the sugar needed to be put in my mouth. The red guy reached into his vest and pulled out a small bag. I was vaguely aware that I was supposed to open my mouth, but when I tried, I realized it was already open. When did that happen? I blinked a few times, trying to recall what was going on a sweet taste hit my tongue. My mouth closed on its own, and I heard my lips smack together a couple times. Then, my mind was free from the cloud. I looked at Nash, still holding me by the back of the head.
You can let go now, I think," I said. "I feel better."
"Oh, damn, that was fast," Kent laughed, and Nash released me. "Usually takes a few minutes or a nap."
"I could go for a nap. What happened to me?"
I gently massaged my head and noted that my temples were pulsing a little. I had no doubt that without 10, I'd have a splitting headache. Everyone watching me with varying levels of concern. "Well, the defensive warding is designed with several security features," the fairy explained. "First, it's difficult to get through because it's unnaturally strong. It takes a lot to bend the metal, and even more to break it. Second, there are several glyphs that have a variety of effects overall. Some of these glyphs absorb magic, some add even more strength to defense, and some cast a shroud over the mind of those who try to study defense for weaknesses."
"I wasn't studying it for weaknesses, I was just admiring it."
"I guess it doesn't know the difference. The guards in Clementa should have warned you."
"They were probably pretty distracted. So shrouds cause confusion?"
"Shrouds can do a lot of things, and in this case it's actually supposed to put you in a coma for a few days. Plenty of time for the bailiffs to determine your intentions. If they decide that you weren't being malicious, they give you some sugar and wake you up. If not, then you get some jail time."
"The court has a jail?"
"Nope. They take you right back to Clementa, at least in theory. I've only ever heard of the shroud being triggered by accident."
"That's because the wild are pretty hush-hush about it. Studying the fence is considered espionage," the red guy said. "I work as a court recorder, and a few years back a guy got caught by a shroud. He had a notebook which revealed that he had been trying to map the glyphs on the fence. Got convicted of espionage and sentenced to 5 years of hard labor. Got off easy because he was so cooperative." "Cooperative?" I asked. "Yeah. He was very forthcoming with who sent him and why. Turns out there were some mages from one of the southern kingdoms who wanted to know more about glyph magic, but knew that it was illegal to pry, so they paid a guy to pry for them. The judge also issued an arrest warrant for them, but the southern kingdoms didn't really do extradition." "I see. Oh, and thanks for the help." "No problem. My name is Ujin." He offered a hand and I shook it, introducing myself. Then I answered a few questions about being a human. The other people sitting around us were pretty interested too, but kept silent as we talked. "So what brings you to see the court?" I asked. "Just dropping off some records," Ujin shrugged. "Trials that the fair folk have vested interest in, changes to the city legislation. Then I grab the responses and bring them back. Exciting stuff." "Responses?" "Yep. The courts have a right to object to rulings made in trials that they are involved in, no matter how little their involvement is. It isn't a right that I've ever seen or heard of them using, but we still deliver the records just in case. We also keep them appraised of any legislative activities in case they wish to visit the city. Bad chance of that." "I take it that as a court reporter, you're a permanent resident of Clementa," York interjected. "That's odd for an imp." "It's not that odd," Ujin shrugged. "I just like the city more than I liked traveling aimlessly. Plus, well, you probably know how imps are. It's best to distance yourself unless you want to be affiliated, you know." "Really?" I asked, appalled. "That's Nash Ulter, Uke Ulter, Nick Smith, Larry Vassal Myro. You are to appear before the court," the lanky Fay interrupted. "Stand and approach the gate." I felt the compulsion to rise, but it was much less intense than the compulsion to sit at bin. I attributed this to the shroud.
We rose and I stared at Ujin for a moment. It bothered me that he'd given up on his community, his people, instead of fighting to change the things he hated about it. I couldn't really place why I felt so strongly about his defeatism, though, and it wasn't really my place to try and change his mind. Instead, I gave him a nod.
Thank you for your help. May we meet again under better circumstances, I said.
Sure, that'd be nice. See you, human. Yoke, Nash, and Larry and I approached the guard, who stepped aside for us. Once I was out of the way, the gate opened without a sound. I took a deep breath and led the way through. It was finally time to see the court. End of chapter. I'd quickly like to thank our Tier 5 channel members, Casper Arnholtz, Jon Creighton, Manatharia, 050, Dragzoon W.R.E, and Elijah Silvercross. Thank you very much.